And so we're gonna cover a lot, I'm just gonna jump right into it, because I think people will keep joining, but we have a lot of ground to cover.
If you can put your Zoom, so we can see your face. If you're new, I'd love to be able to see your face so you can see ours. But if you can't understand, I know some of you are actually at work now in the office and can't do that, but if you can. And by the way, wait, we should say this. 5 years ago today, I think was our first COA class, a LIP class ever, right? Because it was 5 years ago the pandemic started. So just as context, if you knew, we started this class the week of the pandemic. And I thought it would go for about 2 weeks until that pandemic just kind of ended, 2 weeks until COVID sort of just disappeared out of our lives. And here we are 5 years later, we're still doing this. So yeah, we're at LIP class 227. Geez, we thought we'd have, 2, maybe 3. But anyways, it started this week 5 years ago. It's
Exactly.
insane.
Yeah, it's exactly this week. If you recall, the pandemic shut down and the whole world, going.
I think they all
sort of-
remember.
Yeah.
How could you
Right.
forget?
In case you forgot, we'll bring it back up on March 13th. So it's kind of interesting, this journey of what's happened. And obviously, these classes that we've been running every single week for 5 years now, we never thought, we always felt the content would be valuable somewhere, never thought AI would mature to the point where it can now read all the content and parse it apart. And customize by individual exactly what you need advice on. And so if you haven't tried it, our team's still working on the beta version, but it's AI coach at nextjump.com. And it's pretty good at actually giving you just coaching. And it's the closest you can get to Megan and Charlie just giving you advice as in another point of view and anything you need help with. So this class itself,
just so you know, Simon is saying, if I hadn't been for perks at home, I don't know where I'd be right now. But for most, it was not a perk at work, it was a perk at home, but through work,
It's true. So the antidote to depression equals wanting, and we're gonna go into wanting. We've used a lot of synonyms to the word wanting before. We've used the term VX, which is version X, which is typically in software development. We've also used words like Eden for Garden of Eden from Susan Cain, right? She did The Power of Quiet and Introverts. We've done a lot of similar words. A lot of sports athletes use the word desired state. Can you visualize actually winning? What does it look like? And there's a lot of power to being able to not only visualize it, see it, and then go after it. Right below that, put a little subheading that the root character trait to go after what you want is courage. And we'll talk a little bit more and we'll translate concepts into practical advice of what you can do. So let me just dive here. First thing, just real quick, if you get a chance, if you even look at, say, my Twitter account or any of the videos our team's pulling up, we pulled off in 30 days this amazing event, dancers and the chefs. We had 4 different dance teams. These are pictures from the actual event. From Alvin Ailey, who I didn't realize is the #1 dance company in the world.
Terry's oohing and eyeing. I can see her face. That's making me happy.
Yeah.
I can see her face. It was really cool. This is the group from Alvin Ailey. Unbelievable. So we had 4 dance groups. But this Alvin Ailey, this is the students from their program. My God, sitting front row for that. That was one of the coolest experiences. They were phenomenal. Big Papa loved it.
So we had a hip hop group, group of ballerinas, Alvin Ailey, and then this Broadway burlesque group. And to me, one of my favorite parts is when we got them at the end of the performance to come and battle each other. And to me, like seeing the Alvin Ailey group battle to a hip hop song against the hip hop crew, that was very cool.
Well, seeing the ballerinas doing the twirling to the hip hop music,
that was cool.
That was very cool.
But anyway, so
anyways, it's fun.
First Thursday of every month, we have some big event. I think the next one is a charity poker tournament, which is about to fill out very quick. So it's 10 spots left. So if you get a chance, please go and take your spot. If not, but it should be like a fun evening of Michelin chef cooking with actual poker playing. And we set this up so if you're a beginner and you get bumped off, first we'll have lessons an hour before. If you get bumped out, we'll have side games. So then it's all around hanging out and enjoying people's company. And I think you keep half the winnings, the other half goes to charity of choice, whoever wins. So hopefully good causes you guys support. All right. I was going to play a bunch of videos. I'm just going to tell you what's in the video for the sake of speed. There was this short, like almost 2 minute, maybe a little less than 2 minute video with Joe Rogan and this guy, Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen is the world chess champion. and arguably has been the best chess player ever in the world. And he is just trying to like, pick his brain of how he thinks, how he operates. And this word obsession came out. This notion that the reason why he's so good, he's thinking about chess all the time, right? He's thinking about plays he wants to do. He's thinking about the plays that happened. And this notion of obsession, where an individual's mind kind of on its own, is thinking about every detail and nuance, and this notion of visualization, the notion of playing out scenarios, playing out what you want to do. And there's that stark difference between those who are great and those who are not. It's tied to how they obsess, but they control their obsessions in the right places. And so we'll go into that, which is a really important part of success. A lot of failure in life comes down to obsession that seems uncontrolled, even though it's your mind. We obsess about all kinds of stuff, right? And then when someone challenges you, why are you obsessing on that? Almost like I can't help it, right? I can't help it. I have to. I was told to. There's every element of giving up the agency of your mind, even though it's yours. There was another quick little clip I was going to play. Mark Andreessen is one of the top venture capitalists. Him and Ben Horowitz created Andreessen Horowitz. It's the two last names. And it was interesting. It was talking about, as they get pitched by all types of entrepreneurs, how do you know a faker, right? How do you test for like kind of the bullshit, right? Someone's pitching and they don't really have skills. They don't really know. And he talks about how he keeps asking, in this case, the entrepreneurs, increasingly detailed questions. And at some point when they're a faker, they fuzz out. And the difference of someone who fuzzes out and someone who doesn't has to do with how they obsess in the details. And in this case, he's talking about entrepreneurs talking about and thinking about stuff for years. But this is actually exactly the same when it comes to any individual and any topic. If you want to know if they're bullshitting you, just keep going into more and more details. And you'll see that they might cover the top level detail well. Like, you have to know your why, your purpose, what's your mission, your reason. And then they might even go into some detail, like, at some low level detail of like talking about exactly why this is important. But then you'll see that it won't connect. Somewhere usually in the middle is where it won't connect and they'll fuzz out. And so this notion of probing and inquiring in detail helps you catch the fakers versus the people who are truly obsessing about something. So hold those thoughts in mind because we're going to come back to that. And that becomes an important element of wanting. True agency of what you want and what you care about shows up in the details and how you spend your mind obsessing on the details. Okay. This was a slide from before talking about mental chatter. There's a woman, Martha Beck, had done a study basically saying, if you think of anxiety and creativity on opposite ends, I threw two arrows. They kind of play tug of war, meaning if creativity shoves harder, then anxiety shrinks. And when anxiety shoves harder, creativity shrinks. But I want you to change the word creativity to wanting. The word creativity kind of denotes like, I got to paint or I got to go, use Play-Doh and make something. And so it denotes like usually a childish sort of like, thought or a childish initiative. That's not what this is about. Creativity at the highest level is the same as wanting something and going after it, obsessing about it. And the act of doing that, which some people will call being on a mission, it actually shoves out anxiety. It's in the research that it has this amazing impact of shutting down anxiety. And despite all the breathing techniques and every other technique you can take, anxiety can only be tamed temporarily before it just roars back. The way to permanently or more long-term, long game deal with anxiety is to actually feed and build that muscle of wanting. So I'm going to show you a couple crazy slides. Don't get too crazed about it because I'm going to break it down, but I'm just giving you a heads up. So this is the less crazy version. Looking at the green boxes, I'm just going to kind of visually quench what's on this page here. At the top, you see the blue writing process to outcome. The two extreme ends is where obsession goes wrong. First, a lot of us will obsess on your own anxiety. Why am I anxious? Someone asked you, can you think about it? And the more you feed and spend time analyzing your anxiety, there was a whole video of like mental chatter and anxiety.
Yeah, it's kind of, the old term that people use, which is like not that popular today, is like when you actually go mad, you're kind of going psycho, like kind of psychotic, is when you're only thinking about your own thoughts. So the more you think about your thoughts, the more you think about what you're thinking, you just get caught up in this. It's kind of your own world. That's what kind of going mad is, where you're just in your own head. So that's what happens, right? You at the extreme, you're obsessing on your thoughts. You're obsessing on your anxiety. But I love what Charlie drew here, because I can relate to that feeling where at extreme, at your worst, you're obsessing on your anxiety, and then you flip to, I'm going to obsess on my goals, the outcome of what I have to get done, my anxiety and what I have to get done. And that's it's kind of like it's kind of crazy, but we think we're doing the right thing because I got to get off the anxiety. I got to get to work.
Yes.
I'm going to get to work. I got to get this done. And when I get this done, I'm going to feel better. That's kind of it's
the
a bad
interesting
place
thing
to be.
about goals and all the literature out there and all the internet little memes and short things about you have to have a goal, right? Keep it simple and everything. Our obsession on a goal, typically a metric, outcome metric, does almost the identical thing as obsessing on your own anxiety. And the reason is usually hitting the goal is a byproduct of great process,
Right.
Great input, great focus on the right things gets your goal. But obsessing about the goal, people have I have to hit this number. I have to hit this date. The obsession on the goal gets you nowhere closer to the goal, which is the same as obsessing on your anxiety, only makes your head spin more. And so those two extremes, a lot of people in practice flip back and forth from, and both make you freeze, both make you very meek, often silent. You start spiraling into a really bad place. And the more time that goes by, nothing good happens. Now, in the middle is where the magic happens. And this middle, the 20% versus the 80%, my son Jackson's in high school. So we were walking, actually to go to Dave and Buster's, it's like an arcade place this weekend. So we said, let's walk. We're just chatting along. We're walking. And, Jackson was at the dance event and he was asking Dad, so much about this leadership stuff. What's the one piece of advice you would give to a high school student, right? Just one. And I was like, yes, just one. I was like, usually you got to think two. He's like, I want one, Dad, right? So I was like, well, I'll give you the one. And this is where it starts, that 20%, right? Which is you have to learn to park your anxiety. Because if you don't park your anxiety, you will just keep analyzing and thinking about your anxiety and you spiral out of control, but that's 20%. So once you do that, you have to move to the 80%. And by the end of this lip class, I'll show you actually a reverse way to do this, which is actually start with the 80%. And so I know that's confusing, but we'll talk about it. But I was telling him that you have to park your anxiety, but then the 80% mental energy has to go into obsessing, into wanting something so much that you're on a mission, right? And that mission you go on is actually what will permanently help reduce your anxiety. And so manage your anxiety versus kind of wanting. So now, please don't be scared. This is the version of the slide as it kept growing, right? But we're going to break this down into this first part first. And when I say first part, what I mean is up here in the box, right? To be aware when you're at that fork where awareness is very powerful. And we're going to introduce this term active awareness. A lot of us are used to being in my head, quietly becoming aware, versus active awareness is speaking out loud or writing to usually another human being. The problem with awareness alone is that we cannot often catch our own blind spots. This is not to ding meditation or any of those things. There's a place for that, but often on our most lethal, repeated thematic ways that we spin, it's very hard for us to catch our own. With the help of someone else, especially not strangers, people that know you a few times, it's much easier for them to see. But the hardest part is to be aware when you're at this fork between two types of curiosity. So we had covered this in earlier lib classes, but I can't tell you how important this part is. There is a dark side to curiosity in the research of psychology versus good curiosity. And we think of curiosity, we only think of the good curiosity. But the dark side is far more lethal. And so this is the page on our wall, but I'm going to dive into this in more detail. I can't remember what lib class we covered this, but this is a post from psychological research. Jim Lear is the one who sent us this first. Now, this is going several years back. And it talks about this new research in the Journal of Research and Personality. And it distinguishes between this interest curiosity versus deprivation curiosity. Interest curiosity is what we're generally, thinking about when we think of the word curiosity. It's the motivation to learn new things, the joy of exploring, right? A curious person, you compliment them. God, you're so curious, right? But there's another side of curiosity, the dark side. And deprivation curiosity refers to the desire to reduce unpleasant feelings associated with uncertainty. So think about what the world is
I
today,
was just gonna say that.
right?
That's exactly.
And the volume of pretty much uncertainty around us everywhere. And the desire to reduce that unpleasant feeling creates deprivation curiosity. So what happens in deprivation curiosity? So here are some of the things that will occur through deprivation curiosity. It's motivated, right, to try to reduce uncertainty, but it's heavily associated with errors and confusion. Our brain doesn't process and think properly. Tons of errors, tons of confusion. So deprivation curiosity allows people to claim when new information comes in and you act like you know what you're talking about, right? Like you're familiar with what the data is, and it's like as if you're processing perfectly. It is very good at finding meaning in bullshit. I don't know how many times you read something that's kind of BS or misinformation, or you talk to someone who has no place to give you advice on something because they're either homeless or they're just not expert in that domain, and yet you listen to them, right? And then you find meaning in it, and you might even repeat what they said. And it's like, wait, who told you that? And then I bumped into this person at the subway, and yes, I think they might have been homeless, but they had this really good point. You find meaning in bullshit coming from bullshit people too, right? You believe disinformation, right? Enough people saw it, said it, you just kind of spread it. It lacks intellectual humility. Often you'll find in deprivation curiosity, we were talking about narrow conviction. My God, is it when you argue with someone with deprivation curiosity, it literally, you would think that you insulted the grave of their mother or something. It's just they aren't really exploring for what thought they're missing. They literally have almost how dare you cross my values type of argument. And then the last piece here is indiscriminate openness to information. It's just when I think about a great restaurant, a great nightclub, or just anything great, there's a bouncer and they don't let anybody in. That is the way we should act with our mind. But when you have deprivation curiosity, it's you know what? We tore the doors down, bouncer has been fired. Any thought out there, just welcome, come in, right? Whoever lands and just takes a seat, welcome. And that notion of indiscriminate openness to information. A lot of bad stuff happens. So we spent time with Dan Ariely, who wrote a book on this same topic called Misbelief. And when you dive into the book, it talks about deprivation comes from a scarcity mindset. When you think you don't have enough. Oh my God, I need to solve for something. He goes into detail, and one way to think of deprivation curiosity is when your computer is running too many programs at once, or your phone has too many apps open, right? There's so much processing in the background, right? That it's just processing slow. So when you think of eggshells and static in the brain, there's just too much processing power in the background for it to function properly. He talks about the deficits you see when you see deprivation curiosity. It's hard to motivate, cognitive is not good, emotional control is really bad too. And one of the things that tends to happen, it makes us feel less inclined to take action and less inclined to figure out solutions, but learned helplessness shows up too, right? And he said that in his research, learned helplessness has been linked to an increased risk of depression. It sort of feels like the walls are closing in, right? everything in the world seems to be against you.
That's what
Right.
conspiracy theorists, right? I mean, did you talk about that or not? But like,
Yeah,
that's what you mentioned it, but that's what ends up happening, right? I didn't know if you mentioned it when you were speaking, if I missed it, but when you go to the wrong side, right, where you're in this deprivation curiosity, the worst that comes out is that you start to believe in conspiracies, right? And
Yes.
that's very negative stuff, which is why you can see you just freeze, you do nothing, because you're like, the world is out to get me, there's nothing I can do. That's ultimately learned helplessness, right? Like,
So-
yes, I like this, you guys, because, sorry, can I just,
Yeah.
I asked Charlie, let's put this in, because I have it on my desk and I keep bringing it back up. That, and when I think about that computer processing and kind of the smoke coming out of the computer, it's like it's like coming out of our head. Overthinking, because you notice everything, right? And are you gonna put the data?
Yeah.
We
So
just saw,
this is good.
this is fascinating. We just saw this. We received 11, that we just saw, you receive 11 million bits of information every moment. He actually, in the
It says every
tweet,
second.
a tweet, it actually says every second. But we can only consciously process 40 bits of the 11 million.
Meaning-
99.9% unconscious.
6% unconscious. Our brain is processing,
Yeah.
but the unconscious brain is what's processing most of it, right? So when you think of, and the idea that I only picked up 40, no, you picked up all 11 million,
Yeah.
right? But our unconscious brain, right, that lower level brain is very powerful. 11 million bits of information per second, right? And our conscious is picking up 40 to 50 bits, the rest by our unconscious. And this notion of, do you think there's no errors in there? Do you think that the unconscious brain, by the way, is very powerful? It's what's often driving our decisions and what we do, right? The classic example always that people say is that, have you seen friends talk about a relationship or even a job? And they'll explain to you all the reasons, right, why they should stay in the relationship or they should stay in the job. And then you ask them like a month later, so what'd you do? I quit. I'm like, but wait, you just listed all the reasons why it was great. And then why'd you break up? Or you do the opposite, right? Like all the reasons why this relationship is bad and I should break up. And then, so what'd you do? I'm staying in it. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah,
And when we say, how does it make sense? We're talking about the conscious side,
right.
right? It's because the volume of the unconscious data points.
Is that
Is
why we're
actually-
talking about this active awareness, actually? Because I have to unpack this a little bit, because, well, I guess maybe we're gonna get to it, but this idea of not going silent when you feel anxiety and stress, to keep talking, right? To keep thinking out loud, keep talking.
So,
Is
so,
to
so,
bring
so,
that stuff
so we're
out.
going into, so like Megan's going into the actual way to
Solutions.
solve it.
Okay, so,
But before we solve anything, you have to understand,
yeah,
and you have to accept that this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad. 11 million bits of information age, we're not wired to process that much information,
Mhm.
but we are wired to process that much information. It's just done with another computer in our head, not the conscious computer, it's the unconscious computer. If you recognize that, you have to recognize the unconscious computer is harder to debug. It's harder to figure out what's going on because it's processing 10 million, whatever, like
yeah,
999, like, so 11 million minus 40. That's what it's processing per second, okay? And this term, equanimity, right, stands for mental calmness, composure, and even temper in difficult situations. So recognizing the entire world today is just difficult. So said another way, mental calmness in life today is vastly different than mental calmness 10 years ago or even pre-COVID. You have to realize if you look in the history of the world every 100 years, and it begins according to history around 2020, right? The amount of information explodes and it creates this issue of mental not calmness, right? And how do we attack that? How do we solve for that? It starts with first understanding. So let's see, before I show you the next slide really quick, there's a term that we were introduced to by this woman. I'll introduce kind of some of the slides she shared. There's a term called Johari. I don't know if anyone's heard of this term Johari. This woman from India, Rachna, I think was in consulting and shared with us the science of happiness. In the chat, does anyone, by the way, if you know the answer, don't guess, but if you don't know, where do you think the origins of Johari come from? And Johari, by the way, is the exact opposite of deprivation curiosity. interest, curiosity, as in you're almost joyfully going into, I don't know, and you don't know. Meaning you can go into situations being open-minded to what could happen. Like situations where you say, actually, I don't know, and you don't know either, but we're going into it. That's Johari. So where do you think Johari comes from? Let me see what the chat is saying.
Nothing yet.
What's your
They're
best
not
guess?
guessing.
Take a guess. What's your best guess? Origins of Johari.
Where do you think it's from?
What country? Like, you know.
Where did it come out
that-
of?
I mean, you
Yeah.
can look it up, of course, so don't look it up, don't cheat, but, yeah. India,
India.
yeah, no, that's a
Buddha.
Buddha. I was thinking India and Buddha, right? I mean, Rashna was Indian, is Indian. Any other guess besides India and Buddha? Japan, interesting. Japan's always Sanskrit. Okay, so that's almost India too now. Japan, India. I don't know why all the wisdom goes to Japan and India.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So most people, the Sanskrits. Remember we met Shiv Khemka, who translated all the original Sanskrits over a year in detail. He translated it because there's is it Hindi or whatever? There's an Indian translation, which is not accurate. But
Okay, anyways, Monica's saying Eastern for sure, India. Is
Yeah, no, so this is what's crazy. No,
This is
it's
cool.
not. It's from America, the United States. And Johari is the combination of two people's names, Joseph and Harrington. Very white. Okay, Joseph and Harrington. That's as white sounding as they come, right?
Does it sound like Megachar?
So, yeah, this is what we shared, right?
Megachar.
Yeah, 1955 by two American psychologists, Joseph and Harrington. And they kind of like Megachar, right? That's Megan and Charlie, for those of you who
Do
don't
you
know.
think Harrington's his first name or his last? Harrington's the first name?
I'm assuming, first name, right?
The first name.
Joe plus
Ah,
Harry is
okay,
Johari.
cool. So it
right?
really is like Megachar.
Okay, right? So this notion of like finding Johari, right? So that's kind of cool, right?
Mhm.
So before we go off of anxiety, right? So now we're going to hopefully move off anxiety. We're finding Johari, right? And we're going to go into some of the details of how to do that and practice better. We're going to move into understanding wanting. But when you understand wanting, you have to first understand the opposite of wanting. And I didn't even know there's a word called miswanting. I was like, what?
I didn't even know honestly there's a word called wanting. We don't use the word wanting in the
Really?
English vocabulary. You say, I want this. I'm not wanting this. I wouldn't, that's like
Really?
the proper
Well, I
English.
feel wanting is more of a regular word that I've never heard of miswanting.
I've never heard of miswanting, but wanting in general, I would think you want something. I'm not wanting it. That's kind of improper English, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I
but
think
see, I like the word wanting with an ing.
because
it's
it's
in
like
motion.
longing, it's in
It's
motion.
in
It's
motion.
a forever
I know
thing.
for we use wanting all the
Oh,
time.
do you?
I've been wanting to see you.
Oh,
I've been
really?
wanting to see
I don't
that
think it's
movie.
proper
Terrible
English,
English.
people.
I know.
But you use it.
Someone's
That's good.
using it.
No, when it comes to food, I'm always wanting. It's like never ending. It's like, it just takes like an hour and then I want again, right? So it's wanting always. It's continuous. So someone, Rachna, came into our community. She ran a co-Thursday for us and so I got some of the slides and the science of living well. And she built a business, a practice of teaching this. So I pulled a couple slides from it. It's interesting. Miswanting, right? It's pursuing things that we think will make us happy, but actually don't have an impact in the long run. Jim Lear did a similar study in these books with all these number ones in the world. And how many people say, once I get that, right, I'll be happy. Once I win the Olympics and I get gold, once I win the Tour de France, once they win, all these things. And after they win, suddenly they're unhappy. And then they go for the next trophy, the next thing. I need 2 gold medals. I need, and so there's a never ending. And the notion was this: our brains are really bad at predicting, right? Like
What we want.
what we want. In fact, what will make us happy. Like looking into the future and actually saying, I'm visualizing this. And when all that happens, right, like I'm going to be happy. Our brain is terrible at this. And what she shared is part of the reason is because if you look, this is kind of the whole Indian side, right? You kind of go through time and saying, this is what humanity looks like. This is like all time, right? When human beings existed. The amount of time on the very left where we were gatherers and in survival mode, it's encoded into like our like kind of DNA and genes that surviving was the most important part. And then there was early civilization and then this modern society, depending on how you even describe modern.
Yeah.
My guess is the sliver within modern of this information age, where now we all walk around with basically 11 bits per second occurring the minute you touch your phone or look around. That's a vastly different world that we are not yet accustomed to, right?
Look
And
how
so-
wired we are for unhappiness.
No, I love this cartoon,
I love
right?
this one.
Happiness doesn't just happen. And so the person goes, where did you find that? I've been searching for it everywhere. And someone's holding a jar of happiness and they say, I created it myself. I thought it's such a powerful
Such a good one.
little cartoon, right? People are looking at everyone else, how many YouTube shorts and TikToks and Instagrams of like how people succeeded. And you want to ask the question, how did you make that, right? And they're like, I just made it, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, but what is the 1-2 steps? Just like my son said, what's the one thing for a high school kid? And this notion of going after something, obsessing over something, the best chess player in the world.
Can I
right?
add to this
Yeah,
actually?
yeah.
Because I tried for a few weeks.
Tell me.
Sorry, I tried for a few weeks. I
This
feel
is
I'm
all
not wired for the happiness. I wake up with like, I was telling Charlie,
Just so you
a
know,
few thoughts
None
on
of us
this.
are.
None of us are. A few thoughts. I think we all wake up not neutral. I think we wake up in a deficit. I do think we wake up with more anxiety than anxiousness, depression, sadness, fear in general, right? Given the way the world is right now. So I.
And think of it this way, 11 million
Million
bits of
bits.
info.
Yep.
And
percent.
at night, when your mind is racing, it's processing all of
another
that.
thing I
And
wanted to
most
talk
of that 11 million per second is scary negative stuff because that's what actually sells. It's what gets clicks.
Yeah.
It gets twice the rate of clicks than something that's like happy and good. So as a result of it, we are all consuming
Yeah.
volumes, right? Of negative information, whether you realize it or not.
Right.
But so you wake up having
So I
processed
wake
all
up
of that.
trying to actually put together the things I'm happy, the little things, right? Really, even tiny little things that I'm grateful for, that make me happy, that made me happy yesterday, this morning, what I'm thinking about. But so that's another point, which I forget now, actually, all the coaching you gave me on this, it's too light. And this is where I think the courage piece is coming in, so we're talking about the fight in a second.
Yes.
So
The gratitude
I
exercise,
did try this.
as strong as the science is, in my view, it's way too light.
It's not even close to what I need to be able to come in ready to
Yeah, it's kind of like having this
Right, yeah.
massive migraine and taking
No,
like a
it's not
quarter of an Advil and thinking, you need stronger.
So it helped
right?
a little bit,
You need
right?
stronger.
It helps a little bit. It is good. It's a good practice to have, without question. I think it's a good practice to have, but it was like 5% of what I need is what I realized. The other thing I wanted to say is happiness is fascinating, is actually only, she talked about this, is only in the present. So if you're spending a lot of time in the past, decisions you made, could have made, a lot of
Regretting.
regret, rumination, or a lot into the future, which is all the things that I want to happen, I'll be happy when, or what's
Worry.
gonna happen, or worries and ruminations, or either side. If you're in the past or the future, you can't be happy. The only time you're happy is in the present, is in the now.
Mhm.
So in the now, you gotta spend more time being in the now, which is like, yeah, you gotta be more
Full
fully
engagement.
engaged in the now. You have to be
Yes.
present in the now. So then it's about figuring out, how do you distract your mind from the mental chatter to the future and the past? So I'm, in the last few weeks, trying to be a lot more aware of when that's happening. It is so hard, right? Because
Here,
you
I'll-
naturally see something in the present and then you'll fast forward to what I think is gonna happen
Can I
in the
give a
future.
live example?
Or an indication of something, oh, that reminds me of something from the past.
So can I give you a live example? I think a lot of people like French wines, right? They're known for the best wines in the world, right?
This is so
yes.
random. I have no idea
No,
what
no.
you're gonna say right now.
Right? A lot of people love French wines. I just saw on Twitter that Trump is about to put a 200% tariff on European liquor, right?
Oh, wow.
That's French wines. So if
Sure.
you like French wines, it's about a triple in price if you're in the
Okay.
United States.
I can do California wine. I don't
Okay,
care.
no, but,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry.
You're not as discriminate. I'm saying someone who
I
loves
don't
French
care.
wine. You don't
Okay.
care.
Okay.
Love French wine. How fully engaged are you in the present?
What do you mean?
You're worrying about the French wine, you're gonna pay 3 times as much, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's an example. If you love French wines, you're in panic mode right now. You're in panic mode that I'm gonna have to drink the disgusting California wines. I'm gonna have to go and spend all my savings to buy as much as possible before it moves up. by like, I was gonna serve it tonight for dinner, but I gotta save it now. Like, I mean, you're worrying about all the different ways you have to go and play aggressively to prepare for this. That is actually how we're not in the present, right?
Yeah.
Or Charlie, to the flip side of that, and you're like, wine's going up. Let me go pick up some cases. And now you have a sense of peace where you're like, you know what? I'm gonna begin to hoard these.
Okay.
$200.
Yes.
All right, and
So, but
now
see-
I'm okay when they go up.
Okay, but let's challenge your sense of peace.
Yeah.
Did you hoard toilet paper when COVID occurred? No?
That's,
You
I
did
feel
not.
like that's a private question.
Okay, but point
My wife
being,
did.
point being, panic occurs, right? And as panic occurs, right, not only do the wines you want sell out, prices start going up,
Right.
right? And now you're frustrated because in concept it sounds good. So you try to go and then you find out Trump is just bluffing, he doesn't do it. Now you spend all your savings on this wine that you thought would be more valuable and suddenly it's not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell me, like, how's that for a little worry, right? And,
Anxiety's bad.
and my point being, 11 million bits of information per second, most of it's negative, right? And your brain is wired to go and then wreak havoc based on that.
Yeah.
And that whole book about anxiety, right, that was by Martha Beck, was all around that good luck. If you think you found equanimity, if you think you found calmness, it's just a matter of seconds before you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And to realize this is a real serious sport and we're not very good at it. And
Right.
it's stacked against us in the history of humankind.
Biology.
Right?
Yeah.
So, what do we do? Now, Esther Perel, this is interesting. She is the top relationship therapist. And she talked in her little podcast about wanting, and it was fascinating, this little section. She said, wanting is your sovereignty, autonomy, and freedom. It's akin to desire, longing, aliveness, as in vibrancy, curiosity, playfulness. I added this piece at the end of wanting is not following, following is not freedom. Let me just kind of break this down. When I think of the word sovereignty, I think about kings and queens, right? You know how much, especially like we hosted this women's dance group and, you know, everyone's like, you know, you slayed it, you know, be queen, right? Queen Megan, you know, Queen
It was on my
Kathy,
cake.
like just same, like, you know, I'd love to see King Tom show up some days, but like just this notion of kings and queens have a lot of power, right?
Yeah.
To me, wanting is your sovereignty, wanting is your autonomy, right? As in you have full agency to want or not want, right? Like the example she uses, given that she's a relationship therapist, is you can have sex, but that's not the same as wanting to have sex, right? No, but that was her example.
Right.
This is what she does,
Okay.
right? But there's similar things. You can go and work hard on a product like AI Coach, right? Or you can want to work on it.
Right.
They're vastly different things. And one shows up with doing usually enough to get it done. The other one shows up with obsessing, as Mark Andreessen had, in the level of details, nuances, puzzling and working on it constantly. That agency, which is in your wanting. And freedom is fascinating. Because how many of us feel, well, I don't have freedom because I have to get a paycheck, so I have to work for a boss. And bosses say, well, I have shareholders and I have board members, or I have like constantly someone you're reporting to. So as a result of it, we all walk around thinking we have no agency, that I can't, you know, control my wanting. I have to. But of course you can. Wanting, even through Esther Perel, is actually in your own mind. It's in your own mind to choose to obsess about certain things or not. It's in your own mind to choose to obsess about my anxiety. It's in my own mind to obsess about the outcome of a number or a goal I need to hit by this date. It is in our own mind to obsess about that, which produces usually nothing except freezing and mental spirals and chatter with no action. Or I could actually train my mind to want and obsess about things that could produce more. So I'm going to jump into what I call the elite section of leadership and practice class. It's elite, so you're going to have to stay with me a little bit. If you want to hang up now, totally get it. Your head might hurt less. So in the elite class, I'm going to come back to this slide. And in this slide, if you notice up on top in the yellow, I flipped 1 and 2. And you know what? I'm just going to come back to this for a second because I think maybe it'd be better after the lesson. And so this was going back and forth with someone we're coaching. And this was their notes reflecting on post-coaching session. First, this term informating. Informating is a term that was invented years ago, I think, by someone at Microsoft, but it was all around mating people with information, right? And as stress rises, you should informate more, but we tend to do the opposite. As stress rises, we go more silent, we hide. As stress rises, we get more fake. We start to make jokes. We start to throw out isms and stuff to make us sound smart. Like, let's all focus on strategy. Let's all focus on being happy. And I'm like, what do you mean in detail? You'll see as stress rises, the exact wrong thing happens. There's a lot of detail in here, but I want to spend a little time on this 40-20-40 principle, which is a principle of how they train you to do writing. When you do writing, they say 40% of the time should be in prep, 20% actually in the writing, and then 40% in review. But we tend to usually try to spend probably 90-95% in the writing. And as a result of it, we over-engineer the writing. I've seen this in our team, right? In trying to come up with an email copy that is probably half a page long, they spend countless amounts of time looking for every word synonym and try to word shuffle everything. And so have you ever seen marketers and people write anything? It's like, what? They all look the same. And you spent what? You spent an entire week writing this? And this notion of visceral drafting, writing just viscerally, is saying 20% just crank it out. But what do you do in the 40% before? What do you do in the 40% after? So I'm going to talk about this in this nuance, and this is an advanced class. I think it's good for sales. It's good for anyone doing any type of difficult decision making. So let me kind of walk you through what's in this page. Decisiveness is what we want, but we go wishy-washy. The whole maybe class that we covered 2 weeks ago. So think about the pre-decision. So before you pull the trigger, before you release software, before you hit send in the email, the right mindset is going to be to think it's going to work. And how is it going to work? I'm excited for this, right? If you can't convince yourself that this excites me, what's going to come out is fake, right? You know how many times you try to convince someone else to do something and they ask you, so are you going to go to that thing? No, I don't really like poker, or I don't really like dance, or no, I'm busy, but you're trying to convince everyone else. See, visceral drafting works because it's authentic. I'm excited for this, right? And so I'm taking my best shot. Now, this is something that maybe is a little controversial in the tech world. We had a whole discussion at dinner last night around A/B testing, and I believe that some of the worst things that people took away in the wrong way. I was thinking about this last night. Do you know how many times that a lot of people, in trying to make a decision, build a product, or even send an email to someone, come up with like 2, 6, 10 different versions? If you come up with 2, 4, or 10 different versions sitting down in one setting, they're all going to be kind of mediocre. There's no way you can viscerally draft, or there's no way you're going to create 4 amazing versions, even 2 amazing versions. But a single individual could create their best version. Now another individual could create their best version, and the 2 can get tested at the same time. That's good A/B testing. The idea that one person's going to come up with these 2 amazing options
At the same time.
right?
Well,
At the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be done, but I hate to tell you, most of you will have a skills issue. You're not going to do that well. They're going to sound virtually identical. And or the mental energy put in is going to make everything diluted. So pre-decision, right? One best shot, take it. Now, the wrong way to do it, pre-decision, is the fake. You know the fake, yeah, I'm excited for this. It's going to work. And so kind of like Mark Andreessen, ask them in details. What are you excited about? What do you mean you're excited about that? What do you mean it's going to work? And the deeper you go into details, you'll see them fuzz out, right? And by the way, if you are one who does that a lot, recognize there's only so many times before the tribe you're part of will no longer believe you. So you have to go look for a new tribe, right? A new tribe of gullible people who will listen to your fakeness. So be careful of overusing the fakeness card, right? Then there's a 2 in the bottom that's interesting. You know, the pre-decision is hoping it's going to work. And then there's the negative people is it's not going to work. You know, have you met people who say those words? The hoping it's going to work versus it's not going to work is actually the exact same thing, opposite sides of the same coin.
It's both of them are saying the same thing. It's saying maybe, hoping it's gonna work and saying it's not gonna work is the same thing. It just gets you to maybe.
Yes.
Waiting,
And
doing
so
nothing.
the hard part to understand is in the pre-decision, before you fire a shot, you have to actually get yourself there emotionally, mentally. Like you have to believe. You have to believe. So what does it take for you to believe? And this is the part. Sometimes you need a really good song. And then suddenly based on that good song, I'm like, all right, I can do this. I think this will work. Like you get excited and what you write out becomes coming from, so we'll cover that in a second. So then 20% you take the shot. Now here's what's interesting. On the elite front, post firing the shot, the best, assume it's a no. I fired an email asking for a meeting, right? The best assume it didn't work. Now, how long do you wait? My rule of thumb in the digital world, 15 to 20 minutes. If you do not get a response in 15 to 20 minutes, assume it's a no. Some of you will be like, you know what, that's a little short. I'm gonna wait 30 minutes. Then you wait an hour. By the time you hit an hour, it's a definitive no. But most of us like to, well, I'm sure they missed it. They didn't see it because I'm sure they may check all their emails by end of night, right? Maybe they read all their texts at night. Like, I was like, who
It's
the
so
hell do you know
easy.
that does that, right? Who the hell do you know that does not pick up their phone and check it like a gazillion times per like 10 minutes or even sooner? Rarely do you find a situation where someone has not seen your note till like end of the day. But what do we do, right? In the red, it may work versus it may not work. Meaning, imagine you fire a note, right? Whether it's a client, a sale, or anything, and you're waiting, right? It's been an hour. You're like, but it may still work. Maybe I should give them more time. Maybe I'll give them overnight. Maybe I'll give them the rest of the week, right? And then the negative Nellies, right? It probably is not going to work, right? Just kind of malaise, right? It may not work.
But then they're probably also thinking, but I'm hoping.
But
it
then they
worked,
kind of
right?
bounced it
It's
and may
like,
work,
yeah.
which is called maybe,
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
Maybe, if you don't know what maybes look like, just picture squirrels in the road, right? Squirreling, right? Just like a mental squirreling, dashing both ways, not realizing I'm staying in the exact same place, and then splat, the car kills you, right? So the emotional agility to flip from it's gonna work, right? And truly excited, and then the minute you hit send, 15 to 20 minutes later, you're like, shit, didn't work. And now you're redrafting, right? Like, and so the best analogy I think of is, any of you ever tried out for a sport? If you ever auditioned for a play or some musical or a dance troupe or anything, right? If you ever auditioned for anything, right? Imagine going to a live audition, right? You go up and you got your 1 minute and boom, even before you finish, you're like, stop the music. Okay, we're gonna pass, right? And imagine getting in your hands and knees begging, saying, please give me another shot, please. And they're like hemming and hawing, maybe we'll consider it, right? And so like, they might say, you know what, sit on the side, maybe. If some people don't show up, maybe I'll give it one more shot. So then imagine waiting an hour, right? And suddenly someone didn't show up. So they're like, all right, Laura, you got one more shot, go. Do you do the exact same thing over again?
Right, that's such a good
Right?
example.
Do you literally go and say, let me try to do what I did in plan A when I got cut off, and do I just rerun that again, right? Or do you say, shit, it's a no, so I gotta take a more bold shot? That's iteration. That's how you iterate, not like well, I think the last thing, they might have said a yes if they could just see the rest of it, right? Maybe I'll just try to beg them to not interrupt till I'm done. Or maybe if I just did what I did with a little more color and vigor. Those are the losers who never win. The winners who win iterate, and they go in with the, what I went through before did not work. So what I need to do is boldly different, a boldly different approach. That's your second iteration. And you go back and you do that same thing, and you're gonna take your best one shot. And then after you hit send, or you do you're gonna be like, shit, it's a no again. That's the part that people generally don't get. And so coming,
You wanted to come back.
let me come back to this for a
yeah.
sec. So instead of tame your mind first, which is active awareness. We talked about 0-0 of learning in real time to expose what the hell's going on in your noggin. And trying to understand what's going on in your head is literally trying to understand where the basically 11 bits of information per second got processed unconsciously. It happens all the time. There are emotions being flared up and things happening, and your computer's like doing stuff. Except we're only going to say, let me repeat to you the 40 bits that I picked up. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
And so active awareness, they use the word active because we're so used to passive awareness. We're so used to solo awareness. Active awareness is exposing it so another human being can say, oh, wait, can you stop for a second? That was a weird thing you just did. Okay, wait, why'd you pick those words? Why'd you keep repeating that part? Active awareness is helping expose that chatter to try to catch above all else, am I in deprivation or am I in Johari or interest curiosity? But what we're finding is people find this to be such an exhausting exercise, they never get to wanting. And 80% is in the wanting. So oftentimes leadership and practice is flipping the whole equation. So instead, the new sort of guidance is this: wanting. And Josh Waitzkin, the chess player, said investment and loss. I think of wanting as thinking about 3x fighting, not 1x, 3x. Imagine sending an email request to have a meeting, right? And most of us spend all our energy for that one no. That's 1x fighting. I want you to think same situation 3 times. I'm going to have to battle 3 times. So what I just showed you in the elite process, right? This whole thing, you're going to go through this cycle 3 times, which doesn't mean you're going to fire all 3 shots at once. But in every single situation, mentally prepare for 3x fighting, right? Any discussion with another human being. So you're like, I have a difficult conversation to have with Laura. I have it, right? I give her my peace of mind and thinking, I'm done. That's 1x fighting. 3x fighting is to give her a peace of mind. I might need to give her even a few minutes to process. And then I'm expecting her to come fighting back. And then I'm going to give my second fight. Then I expect her to still come back. And that point, I'll do my third fight.
By the way, when we're saying fight, we're talking about hard things, difficult conversations, things that we want to avoid, conflict, all the hard stuff, right? Because this is where the courage is required, not just go. I mean, the word fighting sounds like you're just picking fights. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about picking fights.
I'm
talking
using the
about
word
the
fighting
difficult stuff
because
that everybody avoids.
fighting is another word, is a synonym to courage. And so I put over here on the right, pick your error, right? You can actually approach something as a wimp, or you can approach it as an animal, okay? I'm picking 2 extreme words for a reason. If you pick animal, trust me, you will pay the price, right? People will criticize, people will react. And what you'll find is when you're a good animal, you'll find that you have Johari, you have interest curiosity. When you're a bad animal, you have deprivation curiosity. And so the act of trying to do this 3 times in any situation, right, is going to make you understand the need to learn active awareness. And oftentimes we're human beings, we don't like to learn new stuff until we really need it. So if you consistently err on being animal, you will learn that shit, I need to be aware when I'm in deprivation curiosity mode versus I'm finding Johari, right? I'm actually interest curiosity. That will come second. But if you're not choosing to pick the error of animal, you're choosing to pick the error of being a wimp. And if you wonder why you're spiraling, nothing's happening, every day, every week you're coming in, repeating the Groundhog's Day, it's because you're picking the area of being a wimp.
I think you were saying last night too, like both are tough, right? Both situations are tough. Waking up every day, feeling wimpy and playing safe and things not changing is tough, but so is actually going animal and trying to get shit done.
So
Courage reps, whatever you want to call it. Right?
So-
You're saying both are tough.
So this slide we've shared before, I think this is the last slide I have. If you think about mission, and mission in life has gotten difficult on the right, the human skill is to understand your emotion, mindset, or character before realizing that's what drives our decision making. You can add in experts, AI, robots, you can add freelancers, you can add other stuff. But at that center, The one thing that we are lacking in today's uncertain world is courage. Courage is the number one character trait that we have to rep. And so this notion of picking the harder choice as a default in order to train courage, and courage will transcend everything. Because you will find in every single thing that's out there, you need to generate courage. But we don't have it because we're generating wimpiness, right? And we're scared of the mistakes we got yelled at for when we're animal, right?
Yeah.
When we went reckless courage. And so instead of sticking to reckless courage or animal, we stick to being a wimp. And you wonder why we cannot tackle uncertainty. And so I put down there, you can't quite see it, under courage, I put micro reps versus big reps. We only rep courage in big ways. And we're exhausted from that one shot, which is why in the emotion of courage, instead of a 1x fight, it's 3x fights in every situation. And I'm giving you 3x, eventually you will learn how to do hundreds. Now, the person who likes to do 3x by saying, so here's how I do it, I'm gonna picture having this difficult conversation with Laura. That's my 1x fight that I'm planning now. Now I'm gonna prepare a list of reactions Laura's gonna give so I can prepare my second fight. Then based on my second fight, Laura's gonna respond. So I'm gonna now come up with all the ways she might respond to my first fight, to her second, back and forth. And we have this meta discussion.
And then you lose all the courage. You're like,
Yes.
let's not bother with that, because that, yeah, you've already determined that's not gonna go
That's
well.
not
Yeah.
training courage.
Right.
That's training overthinking,
Right.
right?
Courage would
That's
be
training being a
visceral,
wimp.
right?
Courage would say, hey, let's go with Johari.
Mhm.
I don't know what she's gonna say and she doesn't know either, right?
That's right.
So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look for opportunities to rep courage 3 times. So I see a person, I see a situation, I'm thinking 3 times, not once. So even just the act that I'm already thinking it's gonna be 3 times. Like, you're never gonna email someone thinking 1 email is gonna get responded to. No, I'm thinking I've gotta at least do 3 times.
Tell them
I'm-
about Jeff.
Okay,
Bezos.
so there's a video I showed, someone saying like, in today's day and age on the internet, you can reach anybody, right? I'm like, okay, so this guy talks about how like, I sent an email one day to Jeff Bezos. I emailed Jeff@Amazon.com. Of course, he didn't respond, right? So I followed up 20 times, right? Eventually he wrote back, no, thank you. Okay, it's no thank you, but holy shit. A random guy on the internet got the second wealthiest billionaire on the planet to respond to his email? What?
Yeah.
A guy who's built a $2 trillion business just by fighting and pushing 20 times?
Mhm.
Like, that point was, that's what it takes.
It's interesting because you were saying the drive, right? The, oh, Nelly dance.
Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
saying that, so the 4 dance groups that went, love all the groups, but I'll tell you the Alvin Ailey group, different level. Like, I watched and videoed each one prepping. I'm just curious, what are they doing pregame, right? So I just took a video and just kind of looked at what they're doing, right? Julia's ballerina group, they were still rehearsing and looked nervous, right? They're trying to practice the steps. The hip hop group, kind of like all separate, they're like 20 girls, and little groups all just rehearsing their little part, and someone's critiquing it, whatnot. And then the Mitchell's group, I couldn't even find them, they just disappeared, right? And like kind of hiding, didn't even see the stage and whatnot.
Yeah.
The Alvin Ailey crew, 2 different things happening. One group was in the gym and they were kind of like working out, goofing around, like making jokes. And the other
Very
group was just,
calm, though.
but the other group was just passed out. They were in a room, just passed out. And I was like,
Napping.
Jesus, right? You're about to go on stage.
Yeah.
And just the energy you can feel. There was no nerves. They were just kind of jamming and hanging out as if like you went to someone's living room and they were just kind of chilling out. Like someone's passed out, someone's making jokes, someone's doing like a little workout while like they were just different vibe. So there's the post-event view. And so talking to all of them, like, it's like the other 3 groups had almost like a, oh, it's over, right? I gotta go and now eat or this or that. The Alvin Ailey group, vastly different. End of the night, they sat me down and they were like, you know, can I ask you a question? I was like, sure. And it wasn't just a question, it was like a life mentoring question. And it was like one person asked and then like 19 other people just hovered around. And I was on the ground kneeling and I was like looking up like, wow, there's so many of you. And there was like a, you know, We are very driven. We love your help. We are so driven. We will work our ass off, but we know our careers are screwed after this. What do we do? Any thoughts, advice? And then they started reciting what they had observed in the whole day, observed in me and Megan, what we did, the event, our speeches, broke down details. I mean,
Yeah.
holy shit, they were paying attention.
Yeah.
And holy shit, they were driven. They were driven, probing, asking questions in every which way, wanting to get guidance and help of how to actually do better, knowing that the chance of them making it to the very, very top, even though they are already in the top,
Yeah.
is so hard. It's like going from like Division I football players to like NFL and then the all-stars,
Yeah.
like, or the pro team. Like, it's like, they know it's that slim. So, but my point was, this notion of obsession, of wanting, of having courage to fight for what you want to do. You have to train it like a muscle. And you have to train it that in every situation, it's going to require at least 3 iterations, 3 times, without knowing what they're going to be. And I'm giving you 3 as a placeholder for all us little Padawan baby leaders in development. Eventually, you can do hundreds per situation. And you kind of like don't mind. When someone's like, God, I try to convince you to do this and they were difficult. I'm like, that's what everyone is, difficult. Well, I try to work on this project and no one's responding, it's difficult. I'm like, yeah, everything in life is difficult. Can you find the Johari, the joy in coming up with a better approach? Like, can you beat this game? And what I saw in the Alvin Ailey dancers, they wanted mentorship, advice, even just minutes of my time to help them figure out how to do better in this difficult game. Like, that type of fight is something that you have to rep. Anyways, that was the class we did.
Yeah, I feel it, because
And by the way, if you do, anxiety goes down.
we were saying the last few days
Yeah.
to attack the emotion to then get in the arena, but get in the arena and then you'll actually want to understand more what's happening, right? As you do something, you're like, oh, why did I just do that? Or you pay the price for, I just did something that I feel not good about. Then you actually want to figure out what was going through my head? Why did I do it that way, right? But it's almost like do it and then understand it versus it's like understand what's happening in your head and then you can get to work. It's like, it's so much to unpack.
That's the
That
whole,
active awareness
that's
takes a
to
lot of energy.
understand what's going in my head is leading to obsessing about
It
my
is,
anxiety.
yeah. So it's
right?
like,
At some point, we can't distinguish, wait, am I just now analyzing the word I picked? Right?
yeah.
Like I'm saying something and then I'm analyzing what I just said. I'm like, wait, now I'm analyzing what I said and should I have said it or not said it? It's like, wait, what are you doing? And that's the chatter that we get caught up in.
Yeah, it's funny, you put up that last slide and there's like manage my anxiety 20% and then wanting is 80%. But then I put up here that, I kind of put it like a mind map with wanting in the middle and connected the 3X fighting to that. And it's kind of like the only way to prepare yourself out of that anxiety is to already prepare your mind that it's gonna fight that, like kind of circling back to what Megan said earlier about waking up in the morning. So it's like the intentionality of having a good day is kind of already fighting all those thoughts that, you're gonna wake up with a deficit. So what does your morning routine look like that helps you fight all those thoughts?
And what I'm saying is this, no matter how much you want, how much you actually think you deserve or want to build a plan for, you will never have the courage to go after it. That's where we fall short.
That's where it falls.
You will not have the courage to have to iterate, have to adjust for difficulty, adjust for pain in the ass something, right?
Yeah.
You will fall apart. And that courage to fight, the courage to fight and iterate on that is the core character trait that's heavily imbalanced in today's world. Once you learn courage, you can then actually learn curiosity, a good kind of curiosity. But because we're lacking in courage and because the world's built to instead make you anxious, right? 11 million bits, I would say the majority of it's built and wired based on what gets clicks, what gets viewership, right? Like, it's like wired against you, right?
On the chat, you guys, I haven't had a chance to look. I know
Chat.
Greg, you had something
Sylvie,
in there.
maybe like,
Sylvie,
do you have a
anybody
thought,
can
question, reaction or anything?
unmute,
I
speak
can Go
up.
to any slide. Anybody on the Zoom can unmute?
There's so much we can talk about this topic, so, but I want to make sure we get to what you guys have in terms of, any thoughts, reactions, any questions. Let's see.
Oh, what is
Okay,
say?
Chris, go ahead and unmute. I can't process it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm wondering if in our prior sessions we ever covered like the thrill-seeking behavior or, those extreme athletes who need courage to take that first step or step off the cliff or, leap off of the whatever it might be to do it safely, right? Because they're risking their life at some level, but
Right.
have that ability to balance out that risk versus reward.
Yeah, no, the thing that came to mind, I was Charlie's looking for something, you just brought up, there's a woman we had met last year, I think this time, we did talk about it, I think her name was Vanessa, God, I can't remember her last name, but she, what's the big mountain, the biggest mountain in the world? Not Mount Everest, was it a different one?
She climbed K2, she climbed all of them. No, it was K2, Mount Everest.
K2, whatever it is, but yeah, super extreme, right, like, in terms of the climbing process that they went through. So she was talking about all the different phases people go through and have to drop off, and the psychology. I mean, it was fascinating. She talked about the people that you think are going to get to the summit are not the ones that actually made it. It was actually a lot of the young, really like fit, almost like Navy SEAL like guys who actually physically could do it, but psychologically couldn't get themselves to the top of the summit. But so I'm not answering your question. I'm not answering your question, Chris, but like you're asking like, how do they plan for that without actually risking their lives? They are risking, I mean, obviously in an emotional context, you can feel like if I give Laura feedback that's really critical and then I offend her or hurt her feelings, it can feel like that. It's like, why would I want to put myself in that position, where it just feels like, I can be criticized back. It's like an attack. It can feel like a really like,
Mhm. Yeah, it can be incredibly rewarding, right? You're stepping into the unknown, you experience it, and you get that real rush, and you want to live that again, right? Somehow, but in a way that's safe, right?
in a way that's safe.
You know what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to email myself something that's getting stuck in the email. Give me a
But what is
second,
it?
blank time.
But Sylvie, go ahead and then we'll come back to it.
I was
Sylvie, go
going to
ahead.
say that I also think previous experience with fortitude and adversity can be extremely helpful and things like that, kind of speaking to the example that you just gave. I think sometimes it's the people that you don't expect to have already overcome a lot of mental adversity or personal life adversity and have learned how to be resilient, how to be present, how to appreciate the moment, and know that inevitably things could disappear and drop off again, creates a kind of mental fortitude to drive you up the mountain, which might be why the physically strong men who have been very physically accomplished don't make it to the top, and the person that you wouldn't expect does, because mentally they have to get to the top because they've already gone.
So the
through
top
it.
thing that someone, Vanessa talked about was, I mean, as you go up, especially climbing high mountains, like breathing and respiratory, right? Because oxygen is very thin. But the problem is this, everyone is coughing. So at night, you're hearing coughs everywhere. Everyone's thinking, I could get sick. And the act of actually, I could get sick is getting everyone to literally mentally just crap out. And so despite them being physically strong and whatnot, they didn't plan for being scared psychologically of I won't be able to breathe and I could die. And to your point, what we've seen as a constant theme is those who have been through more difficulty, what they often end up narrating is I've been through much worse than this.
I was just gonna say that, Charlie, this is the hero's journey, looking past what you're referring to, Sylvie, and looking into the past. We call it so much jargon, but Dev GPS, this program we built, which is actually looking into your past and recognizing I've been through more. I've been through really tough.
Much worse.
Much worse, but most of us don't have a habit of thinking about it. We'll just think, I'm past that now. Like, well, I'm past that. I got through that.
I would argue
And-
worse. I would argue worse. Most of us think that was so traumatic. I never want to, and so as a result of it, we actually turn it into a bigger terror in our head.
Okay.
Or they
Interesting.
relive it, right?
Which
It's
is
like
the
it
whole
actually,
trauma.
Right,
Yeah.
creates a
Holocaust
reliving of
survivors,
it.
all
Yeah.
survivors who still experience the trauma of it over and over again.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
And I think that
Actually
happens at the
resolve
99 point.
that and can look at it from a place of dispassion, right?
Yeah.
Detachment,
Yes.
which is where.
Like it's
certain
over, it's not still
Right,
happening
it's not
to
that
me.
it's just, right, it's
Right.
over and it's just a story now.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Because it's over. And in
Right.
that way, if I look at the past, my life as a story, I can learn from that story, the hero's
Yeah.
journey, right?
And there's a
Right.
part where I will go on further, with your last point that I can learn from. That's the lesson people never dive into. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
I made it through, which means my body, mind can survive through difficulty
Yeah.
of that level. Above it, maybe not, but that one I can. And so now recognizing how much stronger I was than I thought, physically and mentally. And then you start to look at everything below that one level, thinking, oh, I've done this before, right? I'm wiser now, in fact.
Yeah.
And that notion of being able to narrate psychological strength comes from experiencing difficulty.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who don't realize that way. You survive through worse.
Well, and
Yeah.
there are even like psychological tactics and therapists that
Yes.
believe that you can't, right? Like once you have gone through a big trauma, like that's it, you are broken and now
Yeah.
you just have to learn how to cope with that,
Yes.
which I believe is really doing people a disservice.
Yeah, agree.
Because it's not
Totally
Like
agree.
you're broken and you can't, yeah, there was,
Absolutely.
Yes.
what was her name, Abigail Shrier, she talked a lot about that, like that is such a disservice to people, it's like labeling you, I think actually it was like the US military versus the military in, I think in Israel, where in Israel you get, you see somebody die right in front of you and they take you and they say, you're gonna be okay. We're gonna send you home for 2 weeks. We're gonna send you home. You're gonna be okay. This is a horrible thing that just happened that you witnessed. You are gonna be okay. You're gonna recover. You're gonna come back in a few weeks after you have some time to recover. In the US, you see somebody's arm get blown off or a body, something horrific in the US military. They tell you, you have been traumatized and you will be traumatized forever. You will never fully recover from this. It'll be part of your life forever. They'll tell you to go home. It's almost like maybe you come back, maybe you don't. Like they just make it like this is your life defining thing and you will never recover. And by telling you that, I will never recover. It's horrible.
It is unacceptable.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Chris,
sorry.
Chris, the question you asked, I was
Okay.
looking for this diagram I drew. So SA now stands for situational, like kind of assessment or awareness now. I drew it in the sense of in our life at any given point, there's a sense of all the stuff happening, projects, right? And within that, your circle of stuff happening in your life, you have to be aware of kind of all the moving pieces in my life. And then there's one that's kind of the most important, meaning winning that one becomes more important than some of the others. And I drew the green biggest one versus all the small ones, but we tend to go and wander into others. And so your question maybe wasn't exactly like this, but this notion of I want to feel alive. I want to feel, as even Esther Perel said, I want to feel sovereignty, autonomy. I want to feel freedom. I want to feel aliveness. So often we look at the smaller things that are easier or the newest thing that's coming in. And instead I make that my priority, right? And I choose to go and try to be courageous or even reckless on that newest thing. As opposed to if you assess correctly, what's most important. That is what needs the chipping away with fight and courage all the time. And sometimes, yes, we do need to oscillate on something easier, but in order to go back to the important thing. But instead, we make the end goal just thrill seeking, right? I need to feel alive and thrill seek. And oftentimes you'll see it comes down to something easier or something new that comes in. So I just shift my whole life goal and wanting and focus to that either easier thing or the new thing.
Shiny objects.
And how to actually rep and discipline yourself, saying, hey, I'm looking at it again, right? And you can reassess every so often. This is the most important thing to make progress on. This is what matters and makes a difference. Whatever that is at any given point, to have to learn to build your reps towards that.
Excellent
It's
points.
okay to have a little
Great.
sub distraction, but to then go back to what matters, right? So that was the one I was
Yeah.
looking for. Other questions or thoughts? Brad? I can jump to a slide.
Go ahead, Greg, I think, did you have one or no? Loris, did you have one?
Anybody else can unmute too? Okay?
I think that last slide really brought it home.
We can't hear you, but. He's saying, I've been observing recent connection of areas where I'm feeling lack of courage and avoiding, that I also pay less attention to details. A lot of what you just shared, but the mindset of preparing for 3 times fight reminds me of the hard mode mindset when acting as though it's not hard mode. It can flop from can do it to can't work.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Megan was just reading it, but yeah, it's there's a lot to chew on in here. It makes me think of in some ways, kind of the wanting, and I can see myself getting too outcome oriented. So I think that is certainly a pattern I've noticed. But it just, to the point you were talking on earlier, and we talked on it last week, of the obsession with details, and on one hand, an indication to an extent of like, that's an area where you're doing that is aligned to what you want. I can see and have felt the opposite of it, where it's like, I'm avoiding, I need courage, that I also tend to, it's an area where I'm missing on the details. So maybe it's kind of obvious. It's just another way of, I've been observing myself of where I'm avoiding.
Yeah, so I'm combining the slides to show you sort of maybe how to think about this. Obsession and wanting is in your control. Like that example of I can have sex, that's the pro. I can want to have sex is vastly different, right? I can like go build a product, right? If you're an engineer, I can want to, right? I could send this, email and try to engage this individual, right? I could do it, or I can want to. And obsessing is vastly different, which is synonym to
Yeah.
wanting, to the VX, the Eden. And the point is this, we end up as being mentally untrained, mentally unaware, mentally lazy, obsessing on these extremes of anxiety, my own anxiety, or these goals, wherever it came from. Whether someone gave it to you or you came up with it, we obsess on it, and neither one produces anything effective. Obsessing on it produces nothing effective. And so then there's the whole Chris's question about like, well, how about thrill seeking and whatnot? Yes, if you need that little break, yes, but to go back to then what matters. Learning to obsess about what matters and being aware when you're not, right? We often like think, well, I'm either interested or not, right? That there's a whole, I think Ben Horowitz gave this graduation talk about like passion is kind of bullshit in his view, right? That the pursuit of passion, like it's like it makes everyone go wrong because I'm not passionate, that's why I'm not doing it. As opposed to learning the skills to be passionate about anything. Like it's a rep skill. But the reason why it falls apart is it gets difficult.
Yeah.
Everything gets difficult. And then what's required is courage. That's where you can't get over the hurdle. So when you learn to rep courage and learn to rep that, like, if I go and look at my life now at any point and say, you know what, the thing that makes the most difference is that green big circle, right? The essay now part, learn to obsess on it. Learn to obsess on it, like throughout the day, before you go to bed, when you wake up, learn to use your conscious and more importantly, your unconscious mind to constantly puzzle and attack what matters. And as it gets difficult to start, because it's like, I hear a lot of people like Coach saying, you know what? I hear I hear Charlie yelling at me in my head. I'm doing it because Charlie told me, and so I'm like, well, that's not Esther Perel's wanting, right? That's not the Magnus's obsession. It's not, that's fake.
Yeah.
And you'll see it'll come out. And if someone drills in, you'll see you will fuzz out because it's not real. Like learning to actually do that on anything, right?
Yeah.
That's the skill. Like without it, it's not a skill. A skill is something that I can apply intentionally.
I mean, obviously, we've
Right?
all learned to want and on something. We talk about the self-driven, right? We all have figured out like hosting or like dancing or music, whatever. We've learned or exercise, like we've learned to like it. Exercise by definition usually is not like a fun, oh, everybody loves it and wants it. No, you find a way to learn, which is why we talked about, this is what I said to you last night, stories and routines. When we talked about a story and routine, the story you tell yourself and the routine you put yourself on will get you to learn to like something that maybe you didn't before.
Yes.
But you said you can't get to that until you
Have
build
courage.
this courage muscle.
don't have
because
courage.
it's gonna get difficult.
All of it falls apart because you lack courage, right? This whole notion
Yeah.
of you will lack courage.
Yeah.
You will see that everything is complicated, is difficult,
Yeah.
and you will not get past. The breaking apart point is courage.
The breaking apart point
Right?
is courage, yeah.
And you will not even recognize how quickly you do a wimpy rep. Right? Well, I thought it'd be interesting, but it turned out more difficult, right? I got there, sorry, I didn't know where to show this one thing. Let me find it. It's so funny that I like kept it somewhere in my, where is it?
It's another whole conversation we could have on the subconscious, because we talk all the time about using your subconscious for innovation and all that, but that 11 million bit thing, I didn't realize that. That's like that's a big number.
What I'm looking for is, oh, here, I didn't say that, so. It's someone in the school, they had this banner, and it said, "We do this not because it is easy," in smaller letters, but because we thought it would be easy.
Right.
A lot of times,
Thought it'd be easy. It's like starting a company.
yeah, you start because you thought it'd be easier. Right? And you know, people say, "Oh my God, you're so passionate, follow your passion,"
Yeah.
right? I mean, literally,
What?
like,
So passionate for perks
I
at
wanted
work.
the older ballerinas to give advice to the Alvin Ailey dancers. Stupidest advice,
What,
right?
you want what?
Just believe in yourself. I'm like, they're the best in the world and they know the toughness ahead.
Yeah.
And I say the worst advice because that's exactly what happens. Everyone goes in thinking it's going to be easy.
Mhm.
It's not, right? But I mean, this little banner, no, we're doing it because we thought it would be easy. right?
It's so good.
That's why.
That's
no,
so honest.
We do
you
this
know?
not because it is easy,
Yeah.
but because we thought it would be easy,
Yeah.
right? And now we're in it, and now we're in the fight, right? And I think there's something very real about that, right? Steve, you had something before we go? Steve's always got interesting questions.
Well, no, I was just saying, like, my question got answered a few times because I was going to ask about, like, you have excitement, then you get into it, and then you realize it's harder than you thought, and then your excitement kind of fades away once you realize, oh shit,
Mhm.
this is a lot more than I thought it would be, or this isn't going the way I want. So it's like that wimp rep you're kind of just sharing, and it made me think of two things. One is like, it's probably lacking the awareness to understand when to pivot or try something different, because you're probably still excited about what you're thinking about, but it's just the route you went down you're not excited about, or you didn't have the courage to do it. And then it made me think a lot of times when I'm excited, I'm probably more hoping than excited. I'm hoping it will work, and I don't have that like obsession or fortitude to go into it and really, really push through it. So it's just kind of like listening and making me think about my own things. So like an example I can think about is like sales. I get excited about, launching a new program, selling it, and then once it's sold, I'm like, oh man, this is a lot of hours I have to coach, or how am I gonna, get other people to buy into this and do it. So I was just kind of like thinking through all that as you were talking.
So you know, what it made me think about is, so one of our investors is someone, Jean Warner, who was the CFO at Chase. And I remember when she mentored me early on, she would always talk about her mentors. And the big thing her mentors would say is, Charlie, this is what my mentor told me, don't focus on the money, focus on the money. Like, I was like, what does that mean? Yeah, she's like, don't focus on the money, focus on the money. Like, and her whole point was this, I think of even the word excitement.
Mhm.
Don't focus on excitement. Focus on excitement, right? Short term, small versus the bigger one. And when I think of the bigger one, an excitement, you'll see you will have to suffer through a lot of non-exciting parts, a lot of difficulty, a lot of fight. But the reason why Susan Cain talked about touching Eden, touching the Garden of Eden, there is nothing more exciting than wanting and working your ass off and trying challenging things. You know, that whole phrase of like, what was that whole phrase that the military always reads, the man in the
Man in the arena.
in the arena,
Yeah.
right? Dirtied and scarred up and whatnot, right? And there's trying, but like, and they say it nicely because you don't win, but you at least feel like you tried. And I'm like, screw that. Like, that's not gonna get you excited in the long run. You have to touch it. You have to get there. And that touching Eden moment, when you work hard at it, very few things feel more exciting than that. And so learn to trade up your excitement for excitement, right? Just like, don't make money, you make money. Like, don't get excitement, go for excitement, like big. And you'll see the journey is different. And I feel the problem that we are surrounded with is most advice is short-term based.
Sorry, it sounds like
It's very-
parenting, sorry, it's like so excited to have a baby and then you have it, you're like. A lot more work than I thought it was gonna be. You actually have to go into the long term, you know, and then that's why the moments of Eden feel so good, because it's hard, right? It's like it's exhausting. But that's why it's more exciting when the good things happen. You're like, wow, right? But you don't, if you go
Earned it.
into it thinking short term, this is gonna be great, and it's like, well.
No, but most things we go into it because we think it's gonna be great.
Right, we think it's.
And then
or else
we
you wouldn't
get,
do it.
and then we learn through reality.
Much harder.
It's much harder than I thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then we have a choice, right? In that moment, we
Right.
can choose to say, you know what, I need something easier. So we
Yeah.
look again. Or we say, you know what, this is how, you know, they always say this is what builds character. right?
Mhm, mhm.
I'd like to develop my muscles of courage, of fight, right? So that I don't only go after the little shallow excitement, right? But I want to go after the big.
Yeah.
I'll show you the.
That's a reframing skill what you just did though, right?
Yeah,
That
sorry,
this is-
sorry.
this is
So in
what
case
builds
you thought-
character.
thought I was exaggerating, but I spoke that, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is a story of life for having a baby, you know, building a business, taking a job, right? Like, you know, like you get the promotion, you're like, wow, so excited. I get to be boss. And then they're like, you know, why are you still in the job? Because I thought it would be easy, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see that they're still doing it, right? What I love of this banner is that they're still doing it, right? Now they're still doing it in a zombie half alive state. And there's someone where, you know, when you see someone who's still doing something and they're doing it with the same excitement as if it was in the beginning. That's skills.
That's skills.
It's not, oh, they're just passionate about everything and I'm not.
Mhm.
Because I'm gonna look for excitement. I'm like, those who search for excitement literally do it exactly the same as this little fellow right here. Right? Where did you find that? Because I've been looking for it everywhere, right? It's in your power to create it. And I think that's the cool part about, to me, the 21st century, like sort of leadership and all the lessons for like humankind is that it's now a mental sport, right? Literally with your brain and repping the muscles, in particular of your mindset, which is your emotion, which is your character. If you rep the right one, like you can literally go get anything, right? And the right one is hard to understand. It's courage, and courage is not as easy as people think. Like was it Brent French who was like the human capacity
For
to avoidance,
of difficult things
My
is
God.
endless.
endless, right? That's the same in my book as saying the human capacity to be a wimp, right? A mental wimp. I'm not talking about physical wimp. You'll find a lot of people are much better in the physical courage,
Yeah.
mental courage. I mean, we did a lot of work training the Navy SEALs. Oof, they have a lot of issues with mental courage. But physical courage, holy shit, never seen a group stronger.
Yeah.
The imbalance was quite stark. So, all right. Hopefully that was
That's it.
helpful. We will see you next week for another class in leadership. Yeah, 228. Yes.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Do your reps, remember? 3X. Think 3X fights, right? Every situation, no matter what, whether it's sales, whether it's an individual, whether it's a mother-in-law, a mother, or it doesn't have to be mothers, but usually that's people who argue all the time. Or like siblings, coworker, colleague, supervisor, subordinate, doesn't matter who, right? Whatever difficult thing, go to it and look for it, to rep it. But in each situation, project or individual, 3 times. Do not go in with a mindset of just trying once and thinking, oh, I gotta tell the story how difficult that was and how I tried so hard for that 1X. 1X does not count. 1X produces a 20th century factory working mental wimp, otherwise known as a follower, right? So please don't rep followership, rep leadership, right? So good luck. Hopefully by
Anxious
next
tracking.
week,
All right.
next week
do
we'll
it.
hear some of your,
Yeah, examples.
examples,
Stories, yeah.
challenges, bring some, because
Bring it.
we'll help coach you through them.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right, you guys, see you next week.